Okay, Wednesday, October 26th, Lviv, Ukraine, coming back from the gym. Decided to get up a little bit earlier, get ahead of the day. All right, I was reading the news in America, even the extreme side of the Democrat Party, they're turning against Ukraine and the funding, but they quickly backtracked what they said. But it looks like it's being used as a campaign issue. Whoever stops funding Ukraine first and funds whatever in America, and they never really ever cared about domestic issues. All the people touting this never really cared. Then their life will get better, right? But we're going to go back into a Cold War if Russia succeeds. For the main reason that they're going to get, a big chunk of the grain supply of the world, and they can use that to manipulate, Africa and countries. The grain can be used to manipulate the Middle East, Africa, maybe Southeast Asia to some extent, where we have a lot of resource interests, rare earth metals and what have you. And Iran, for that matter, Iran and Russia are now like best of friends. It's totally ironic because Russia's been more oppressive to Islam than America ever has been. So yeah, I don't get that, but it's happening. And of course there's a lot of oil in the Azov Sea and the Black Sea, so you give that to the Russians, then they have some more control over India and China, so, and then so it wouldn't be good. And now I want to talk about this libertarian thing. Okay, so the whole libertarian premise is like states' interests, should be greater than national interests, and government should be pushed more local. And we basically go back to being a bunch of tribes. Every county in America would be a tribe, or every state. Now, I don't know how much history they've read, but when America started out, it was a loose confederation of colonies and stuff, and then they united to fight the British, and there was a lot of dissent. It was really hard to get that Declaration of Independence signed. We went through the Articles of Confederation. It was the first constitution of the U.S. It lasted about 10 years, and that was where the federal government had to go to the states and beg for money. It didn't work very well. We couldn't work together as a country. There was big disparities of wealth. It was very difficult to do treaties abroad, and it fell apart. There was an economic crisis, what have you. Then they came to this constitution that we have now. And this constitution, I don't know if the libertarians understand, but there's an amendment process, and it's pretty hard. You have to have most of the Congress and most of the states on board to make an amendment or a change. And they've done amendments to eliminate slavery, to allow women to vote, added income tax. Those were constitutional amendments that were passed with a very strong majority. I mean, they're very, very difficult to pass. I don't know what the figures are, but I think it's definitely more than a simple majority. It's like a 2/3 majority of the Congress and 2/3 majority of the states. The Supreme Court's got to buy in. So it's a really difficult thing to do. So that means people wanted these things. So, but let's back up, from the amendments. So after we had this constitution, we had a civil war over the same issue, states versus national interest first. I mean, it was definitely about slavery. Let me kid you not. But the argument the South was using about slavery was that the states should decide if they want to have slaves or not, and not the national government. And during that Civil War, you had the British, and you even had, I think, some French interests supplying weapons to both sides, but there were a lot of interests were in the South to, have the South overthrow the current U.S. government, and then we'd be a bunch of states fighting among ourselves. And back in that time, the French had territories in the U.S., the British were still having a strong presence in Canada. So if the South would have succeeded in the Civil War, United States wouldn't be United States. It would be like, I guess, a bunch of states, and maybe even by now would have been under some European influence, whether it would be French or Dutch or English or Spanish. Those were the main superpowers of the time. French, Dutch, English, Spanish. They were and the Russians too. The Russians were in Alaska, and they even had some colonies in California. So this libertarian view that the states should be stronger than the country is wrong. And if you believe that, then you probably should move here to Ukraine and understand how important it is to have a strong, united country. And when you have a belligerent neighbor, sending, bomb-filled drones to take out your electricity and stuff. You can only protect against that when you have one strong, united country. You can only build tech, like that kind of tech when you have the resource of a nation behind all of that, and all of the brains of the nation concentrate in one place instead of 50 working together, i.e. Silicon Valley. So, the libertarians really don't understand anything about American history. We actually fought a bloody civil war. The bloodiest war in our history was among ourselves about this very issue, that does the country have the power, or do the states have the power and the country has to kind of bend to the states? No, the states must bend to the nation. And now, more than ever, as I was saying in the last video, America maybe needs to look to expand just for its survival. Maybe we need to add Ukraine as a state, invite Poland, Denmark, Norway to join, maybe even, we'd be competing with the EU, but maybe the EU and US and Canada ought to look to merge, and we come up with some common policy that's kind of the best of both worlds, that, has this social system and infrastructure. That's something Europe does well. And America does innovation really well, despite our faults in education and all our faults in society. We build shit better than anyone else. You can see that in the weapons here, this HIMARS weapons. Russian students on average are way smarter than American students, but how come their weapons are all breaking? And, and all this American-made weaponry is just performing brilliantly, like the javelins and the HIMARS and all of this reconnaissance stuff they got up there that I'm pretty sure it's up there. It's just, we're just killing Russians left and right. It's just, it's not even fair. It's like a turkey shoot, when the U.S. weapons are used. And just imagine if Ukraine was a U.S. state and they could build all the factories here and they would just be turning out like they did in World War II, like one B-17 every hour. Turn out one HIMARS every 20 minutes, and then like every village has 10 of them. This would be incredible. And this would be like a new American frontier here. This would be like the next Texas, back in the 1850s. This would be like a land of opportunity. And it would be fantastic, if America could expand its franchise. But also, I think where libertarians might have a point is government is inefficient, right? But why don't they advocate for we don't need states anymore, really. The whole reason why we had states and counties and all this stuff was for administrative regions. We needed an office, we needed filing cabinets, we needed like binders and books and all of this to keep records and, disperse money to projects and all this. Now we live in the age of IT. We could shrink this administrative overhead. We could merge counties in the U.S. I think there's like 3,300 counties. We could aim to get down to half of that, and that would be half of the offices, half of the, staff, half of all of this overheads, filing cabinets, whatever. Everything could go on the cloud, and the Republicans can come up with some alternative to Amazon. I don't know why they don't fight these things, like come up with something better than Google. Like this Trump Truth Social thing is just it's a crappy platform. It's not working right. I think it's barely available on Android now. But this is what they should be talking about, how to use the tech to make more efficient administration in America. We could merge states into regions, like Maine, Rhode Island, and all these states in the Northeast could be like a Northeast region. Then you have a Mid-Atlantic region. You have North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin. You have these places could all be like the Midwest or Upper Midwest. Then you could have Kansas, Missouri, Colorado. I'm trying to think. I think when you go east of Missouri, then you can have like a southeast region like Tennessee and I have to Alabama, yeah, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, you know, that could be like the South or something, Mississippi. So you could take 5 states and group them together. Every 5 states becomes like a region or something. We have 10 regions. And yeah, we'd have to change up our flag. We'd have like 10 big stars, and we'd have an extra star for Ukraine and like an extra star for Guam or something. Or like the Pacific region, like merge Hawaii, Guam, and all this Pacific holdings we have. You know, Alaska is such a big and badass place. We just keep that gets to stay on its own. The Northwest. But yeah, this is like something they could propose. It might be radical, but you know, history is about change. If you look at the maps of Europe and even the maps of the United States, the territory boundaries and the lines change. Even the names of the places had changed over time. But then instead of having like 50 states and 50 bureaucracies, we'd have 10 regions, and those bureaucracies would be the same size as a state bureaucracy. And that would mean either, I mean, the Republicans would love this, more money back to the taxpayers, or I would like to see more money into the infrastructure, which needs upgrading. All that savings could go into rebuilding our infrastructure, building hyperloops, you know, to get, you know, like the way Eisenhower built the freeway system, we could build a network of hyperloops. You know, we could really push the self-driving trucks technology. You know, the thing is with self-driving tech, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to drive in your neighborhood. If they could just get the trucks running overnight by themselves on the interstate, on already the established interstate roads, which have big lanes and which work really well with optical technology, and just deliver loads overnight and take those drivers out. You know, and anyway, there's a shortage of truck drivers. I talked about this on Facebook, and all the Republicans are like, "That's gonna take away my job." You know, well, you know, when they replaced horses with motors, it created more jobs. And this is just an extension of that. You know, so now we're not drowning in horse shit. Yeah, we have air pollution. But all those people who were managing horses became car mechanics. So this would just create some new opportunities. There'd be a lot of savings. The, you know, costs would go down, and some new leisure industries would take off. Maybe they could all go work at bowling alleys, you know, for the same money than they were driving trucks, like, and falling asleep and snorting cocaine and whatever the hell they do to get the load delivered. You know? So, I mean, we can't block innovation. So we need to see Republicans propose like innovations instead of just the bitching. Because it's like incessant bitching and romanticism about the past. We're constantly evolving. I mean, if you look at the human evolution, I mean, our jawlines used to extend, you know, forward because we needed all that facial muscle to chew food, and then we discovered cooking, and our jawlines receded, and our brains got bigger. It's the same sort of thing, you know. So if we can start using all this tech we have to slim down the government, slim down the amount of states we have, the amount of counties we have, and then more money would actually hit the dirt. You know, would actually hit the road, hit the projects. You know, we could build these, you know, mega projects like we used to do in the 40s and 50s. And that would give a lot of jobs, you know, and all those loads and all that building material would arrive autonomously. And so instead of having truck drivers, you'd have more of these, like, you know, much higher paid skilled concrete workers, you know, building dams and, you know, geothermal plants. You know, we got to build 700 new nuclear power plants, you know, so we can stop depending on the Russians. This is where things gotta go. You know, this is the future. Anyway, I'm almost home. I gotta start my day. We'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.